Welcome back to another edition of Intelligence, the podcast, bringing you knowledge with the power to change. We're doing things a little bit differently today. We're starting earlier, and we have some great guests with us. And you see me dressed up today because we're actually on the campus of University of Houston downtown, joining the KAPPA Alpha ladies here at the campus of University of Houston downtown. So we're excited to be here. We're doing a financial rendition today, so we got some great guests. We're going to do things same as usual, but with a little twist on it. So we have our guest today, starting with Mr. GARRIK KEBEDE. Did I say it right, Garrick?
Yeah, you got it.
Man, you know, I've been practicing that for the last 10 minutes, hoping I got it right.
You're not the first one. You won't be the last.
All right, so GARRIK KEBEDE is with KF Holdings. You are a financial investor, correct?
So I would be what's called a registered principal. Essentially, yeah, I help people with setting up investments.
All right, so you're the guy I need to talk to make myself rich.
Yes.
Awesome. Right over next to him is our legal resident advisor, Damon Parrish Jr. How are you?
The second junior, sir.
The second junior?
Second junior.
Wouldn't that make you like the fourth?
No, it's the second junior. Like
Okay. All right.
it.
You always have to be difficult.
I'm always correct.
I don't know about that one, but
The audience agrees.
well, the audience is a smart audience, so I can't really talk to them the way I want to right now. But we'll get to you later. We also have Mr. William Foster, also with KF Holdings. How are you, William?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Happy to have you here. And over here to my left, we have AYESHA Shelton with K&A Company. You are a real estate investor.
Real estate investor. I am the A of the K&A Shelton and co-owner of the company.
Awesome. And make sure you guys, we're speaking up because we have an open forum today, so it's kind of hard to get everybody on these mics. So I want to make sure we're getting everything done. Next, we have our tech guru himself, Charles Sherrod. Can I call you Junior?
UHD alum, Charles Sherrod Jr.
Okay, go Cougs, right?
Yep.
And last but not least, we have the other half of K&A Company, Mr. KEVAN Shelton. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, I'm the K of the K&A. Is it technically Go Cougs though? Is UHD technically Cougs?
Oh, yeah.
I have no idea.
What happened to Gator?
No more
Well, wait a
Gators.
minute. Well, I'm class of 95, so let's go cool.
Was UHD, that was pre-Gator.
Yeah, that was pre-game. I don't know if that's about Gator.
So we're going to start off today talking about Mr. Yeezy West himself. In case you don't know, Kanye went over to the White House several days ago and spoke with the Trumpster. And in that conversation, he gave about 20 minutes worth of what some are characterizing as ranting, raving, a soliloquy, as it were, on his policy thoughts. And he reiterated what he iterated once before about the abolishment of slavery. So he confused us first when he said it. Then he went back and had some help clearing it up, saying that, well, you know, what I meant by this was the prison system is still used as a slave tool based on the wording of the 13th Amendment, and what I wanted to do was abolish that and or amend it. Then he came back on this presidential rant and said, nah, I meant what I said the first time. So he didn't have his handlers checking him on this. Some people are saying, you know what, Kanye is speaking the good word. He's still trying to get the president to do things within the community, and he's just simply using a platform. Others are saying he's out here cooning and doing it for the gram and doing it to our detriment. What say you?
Okay, well,
Go ahead, lady.
I'll be first. For me, I have an unpopular opinion, which would be sympathy for Kanye West, that his mental health issues and challenges have to be on display for us to judge and critique. I think that it's pretty sad to watch, and it's also sad that it's happening to him. So aside from all of the things that upset us, I mostly feel sympathy for him.
So here's my problem with that, and I've heard this come from several other people, which is, you know, the sympathy standpoint and saying, oh, we give Kanye a lot more leeway for his actions than we do the Ben Carsons, than we do the Omarosas, than we do any of the Stacey Dashes, simply because, one, it seems like because he's a lauded musician and because he has some prior mental health issues. Granted, mental health issues do play a role in this, but these issues, I think, are taking away from the fact that I feel like he still knows exactly what he's doing. He's been saying people have been trying to stop me. He has told us, look, I have thought about this. These are my thoughts. I think that this is one of those things where he thinks he's deeper than he really is.
Which is, again, a mental health issue. I just keep going back to the mental health issue.
You know, so I work a lot with people with mental health issues. Every day I work with them. You can be crazy and still have an unpopular opinion and still be wrong. I mean, just because you have a mental health issue doesn't, it shouldn't be, I'm not trying to be mean to anything.
Oh no, he's wrong.
It shouldn't be an excuse for making a wrong decision, right? If he's taking this medication, who knows? It's not even an issue we should be concerned with. The fact is, he has had plenty of time to create an argument, to craft an argument. He knew he was meeting with the president. Everything he's done has been intentional. I don't want to say if you have a mental illness, that's a carte blanche excuse. One, it almost makes any person with a mental illness seem like a child, not capable of understanding their actions. And two, it casts everybody with a mental illness in a negative light, saying that you're going to do things I don't agree with. And with Kanye specifically, his mental illness was never an issue until it was unpopular with us. When he blasted Bush, that was due to mental illness, but he was right. We supported it. And now he's with Trump and whatever he's doing on that stuff, and now we're like, excuses. I appreciate him having a platform with the president. I appreciate him wanting to use it to a benefit other than his own pecuniary gain. I don't agree with what he's saying, and I don't want his mental illness to be an excuse for, or any way, shape, form, or pass what he's done. He has ownership 100% of what his actions were, and they were sad, and they were ridiculous, but they were his actions.
I mean, I agree with you. I don't know, the danger that he causes far outweighs the danger to him. The danger that he causes on a public level far outweighs the danger that he does to himself on the personal, political level that he's everybody's spouting about. Go ahead.
Brandon, let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So when we talk about the danger, does anybody in this room feel like Kanye West still has enough influence with people to change somebody's mind about Donald Trump?
No.
I think so. I think if you're talking about lower, I mean, you got to go talk about the uneducated. We're sitting up here as the gents doing what we do, having read, we stay informed. There are still people, if you ever watch I think Jimmy Fallon does the walk on the street, like, do you really know? He catches people up he had one where he's talking about, well, MLK did a speech the other day, how do you feel about that? People are still saying, oh, well, I think MLK is great. People are dumb. I mean, there are just a lot of dumb people out here that will take what this particular person who is in the public eye, who is a lauded figure, and say, well, yeah, I'm kind of feeling what Kanye talking about around there, not knowing that what Kanye is saying is, by and large, stupidity.
But the thing about that is, black people, one thing we got to realize is we're not a monolith. Like, we have a wide-ranging, diverse amount of opinion and thought on the way things are. So, like with Kanye, for example, one thing I feel like people don't or fail to look at is Kanye is like the king of self-promotion. So if you go back, if you did a quick timeline of Kanye West, every time he has an album or some type of venture that is about to hit the marketplace, he does something outlandish. And each time it's gotten progressively more and more outrageous each time. So like now it's like, before it was like, when he did the stuff with Taylor Swift, it was like, oh my God, like, what's wrong with this guy? Before that it was, or after that it was, Mark Zuckerberg, can you I need $50 million because I got in debt behind this venture. And everybody was like, oh, Kanye, he's crazy. The George Bush doesn't like black people. It was every time you notice, whenever he has a product getting ready to hit the scene, he does something like this. So we have to be able to discern, okay, how much of this is Kanye West having mental health issues? How much of this is his views have evolved into something that may not necessarily align with black people? And how much of this is just plain old self-promotion? Whether we like Donald Trump or not, you got to realize he has a huge following. It's probably 48% of the country, and if he were to tap into that market of 48%, that 48%, you have to remember those people are extremely loyal to Donald Trump. by osmosis, in his mind, he's probably thinking they'll be loyal to me. So I can put out a product, and if no other black person ever buys my products again, if I get these millions of people over here, then that's fine. So we gotta be able to discern whether or not this is really him being honest about how he feels, and whether or not this is him just trying to move product.
So in saying that, do you think that, we have disavowed Cosby, we have disavowed R. Kelly, we have disavowed the other people, and I'm not even talking on let me change out. We've disavowed Stacey Dash, we've disavowed Omarosa, we've disavowed other people who have lost, quote unquote, their black card because of the things that they've said. Should Kanye be somebody that we say, you know what, we no longer mess with you
Can't happen.
at this point?
So
Can't
let me
happen
ask you a
because
question.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Have you, right? You just gave a list of names, Cosby, Omarosa, whatever. They're still around, right? Cosby just went to jail. That's a very real thing. But R. Kelly still performing all over the country to sold out crowds. Now, they might be smaller than he was at one time, but folks are by and large still supporting R. Kelly. When R. Kelly song come on, you ain't turning off the radio, per se, right?
Right.
Same thing with Kanye West. When a Kanye West song played today, if Gold Digger played right now, nobody gonna jump up and down and go, oh, man. So you have to ask yourself, and you make a good point about is it self-promotion, but at a point, are we giving it too much credence at all, right? Because what's the end result? Even this conversation about Kanye, what is it? We can't stop Kanye from talking crazy, because it's like I drive down Scott to go home, and there's a young man on Scott and what is that? Belfort?
Scott and Cullinan.
No, Scott and Cullinan. Yeah.
Okay, well.
Scott and OST?
No. It's like
Reed,
Sunnyside.
you
It's
know
like
what
Belfort.
I'm talking about.
It's somewhere down
Anyway,
Scott.
It's a young guy who literally stands on the corner all day with headphones screaming. And he's on the corner, he's just like screaming. Every day he comes out here and screams on this corner. Am I gonna stop my car in the middle of the street because this guy's screaming? Or am I gonna keep driving?
Keep on driving.
We need to keep on driving. Because Kanye is not putting money in your bank account. He's not, you don't have to let him take money out of your bank account either, for that matter. But for the everyday person, is Kanye saying this to Donald Trump or whoever affecting your life? And if it's not, we need to just move on as a people. We got bigger fish to fry.
That brings up another question. William and I talk about this all the time. Are black people too emotional when it comes to our political beliefs? So what Kanye's done is really tapped into the emotional side of how we view politics. And what we do is when we look at who we choose to support, a lot of times it's not always, but a lot of times, a lot of it is driven by emotion. And if we say, okay, I don't support this person, candidate A, and their views, we get really, really passionate about it. There's nothing wrong with being passionate. But at a point, you have to decide, okay, is my passion actually going to help this situation, help with my views, or help other people persuade me or persuade other people to see where I'm coming from, or is it a detriment? So like with Kanye, it's Donald Trump. Donald Trump is a hot button for African American people, for just a lot of people in general. And so it taps into an emotion or a feeling that we have about Donald Trump. So again, we need to decide, okay, can we logically look at Kanye West and say, okay, that's him, that's his personal views, that's what he believes, and say, keep driving, like he just said, and say that's on him, that has nothing to do with me? Or is it always going to be, I'm emotional about it, I don't like that he did that, and I want to run the social media and, type up a diatribe, or, find other people to say, yeah, and scream, I don't like him, but what purpose does that really serve in the end?
Damon, you had something you want to say on that?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, are we too emotional? I think there are besides religion, politics is a way that people choose to live their life. It's identified. So some might say I'm an atheist and I'm a Democrat. I'm a Christian and I'm a Republican. And those two things are a way of identifying not just who you are, but how you think, how you feel, your passions, or what drive you. That will make you emotional. You know, that you're usually you come from an emotional standpoint when you talk about your religion and your politics, because they also inform your ethics. Right. I think the issue with Kanye, which made it worse for black people, is that we don't have a lot of national voices. We don't have a lot of people who nationally speak up for us and are willing to say what we know to be true and say it unapologetically. When Kanye said Bush doesn't like black people, every black person agreed. Well, he doesn't like black people. He let New Orleans fall. Now, whether that was true or not, that's how we felt at the time. That's how we felt watching those things unfold. And it was a powerful thing for us. And to have a fallen icon can hurt. And to have somebody who was your leader fall or betray you can really hurt. And so I can see why there is a emotional and visceral response to Kanye West. Maybe not to all leaders, but for us to Kanye West himself, I can understand that.
And to your point, before we move on, Garrick, you said, are we too sensitive to other black people's political views? I would say that we have to be kind of sensitive to other black people's political views, because we as the minority constantly in social perdition, we can't afford to have people not on the same path that we're on trying to move us forward. Kanye brings us backwards. We can't afford to lose even 10 people because of Kanye saying, you know what, that's some dope stuff that Kanye said. Let me go vote for this Republican now because I see that he messes with Trump. Let me mess with Trump, even though I'm not feeling him, I'm feeling Kanye. At this point, we can't afford to not be, and I think we had somebody, Clinton Myers said, we are still judged as a monolith. Not only are we judged as a monolith, we are hurt and we move as a monolith, meaning that whatever happens to one of us happens to all of us. So if we're not on the same page, guess what? We don't win at all. And there's not enough of us. White people are afforded the ability to actually have differences of opinion, because at the end of the day, there's enough of them to be fractured. There's not enough of us to be fractured right now.
Well, we can control. I don't agree with that.
Let me jump in on that one, because I don't know that I would agree with that statement, because historically that has not been true. Historically, if you go back to World War II, we were 50% Republican, 50% Democrat. So some of this, I think, going to Garrett's point about us being emotional, there is some validity to that, because if you look at early 20th century, it was more about strategy, right? No matter who got in the office, this is one of the benefits that white people do have. No matter who gets in the office, they are able to retain power and push some type of agenda through for their community. So what we have right now is we've gone all chips in on the Democrats. And if the Republicans, which makes no sense for us because most of us live in the South, and the South is controlled by Republicans. So if you have no voice when they get in office, you're basically just there hoping you get a breadcrumb here or there. So, you know, if you think about, had African Americans moved, let's say 20% of our voting bloc to the Republicans, Donald Trump is never the candidate. He never makes it through the primary. So we have gone so far all in on the Democrats that we don't even get a chance to influence who the candidate is coming out the other side. There was no reason there couldn't have been a more moderate GOP. Whether we liked him or not, Donald Trump should have never been the GOP's candidate. But we have allowed the far extreme, whatever you want to call them, to take control of the GOP, and we have no voice there. And so if I was an investor, I would say your political allocation looks really bad right now. So,
Well, to your point, I just wanted to say this on, are we too emotional? I don't think we're emotional enough. Because at the end of the day, black people across the board, we're not emotional enough to change our financial position as a community.
Right.
We're not emotional enough to boycott or stop doing some of the things. Like, look at the NFL. Everybody's like, oh, this and that and this. But everybody at the barbershop is watching the game on Sunday. Everybody. In the one or two that are going, oh, I'm boycotting or whatever, they're not persuading the larger groups. So as a people, we're not emotional enough to get behind a purpose to change our position in this nation, right? If we were, it would be like the 60s, and maybe we could get behind a larger movement. Right now, we are fractured because everybody feels some different kind of way, and we all can't put our feelings together to achieve something.
Fair enough. Well, let's move on. We're gonna get a little bit more controversial here in just a second. Keep these juices flowing. So over in Wisconsin, there was a man that was sentenced to over 2 decades behind bars for attempted first-degree intentional homicide of an unborn child. Intentional homicide or intentional attempted homicide of an unborn child. He gave his girlfriend a drink that was supposed to have some of the pills in it, that crushed up pills that would abort a child. They up to 10 weeks out from the time of conception. Ended up pleading guilty, got 22 years for it. So this is interesting on a couple of levels. One, we've got a man who doesn't want the kid, and he takes matters into his own hands to abort. The same way a woman, if she didn't want the child, would be able to take legally matters into her own hands and abort the child.
Not quite the same.
Hold on. I'm saying, in theory, in terms of wanting the abortion and saying I'm going to do what it takes to not have the abortion. Granted, this isn't his body that he was affecting. The second part is the fact that this is considered to be an attempted homicide versus a woman or anybody else do it, even a consensual by both parties being able to do it and considering it to be homicide. This is interesting because it changes up the dynamic and it conflates the issue of abortion and what we find as the limits of what a fetus is considered, what a human life is considered, and who has the ability to do what at any given time. We'll start with you, Ayesha.
You're gonna start with me.
Or we can skip right over you and go to your husband, Kevin. What do you think?
So, and I hate to be the women's rights activist, but I think this comes down to women's rights. Regardless of what the argument of abortion and the stages of conception versus the life of the child, this affected her body. And he did something to harm her. Now, if she chooses to have an abortion, that's her choice, right? Because while the child is growing, it's completely in her control, right? It's her job to protect, it's her job to nurture, it's her job to whatever. That's not on you. So to make the decision to say, okay, I'm going to give this person something, because it could have killed her the same way it could have killed the child. So I fully agree with the state of, homicide or whatever, because he attempted to harm somebody completely outside of himself. He didn't go do that to himself. He didn't drink it himself. He did that to her.
So we have some looks of consternation on my right.
What was it? Was the attempted homicide on the court ruled that he attempted to kill her?
No, the
or
kid.
Was it
the unborn child.
That's conflicting, because if you're saying legally that when a woman gets an abortion, and I'm not agreeing with what he did, let me make sure I make that distinction, but I'm just trying to get clarification. If you're saying that a child, let's say 12 weeks, is you can get an abortion because it's technically not a living entity yet, or whatever the legal terms would be. If you're going to say that, then how can you come back and then say he attempted homicide on a child if you're defining a child at whatever stage as not being an actual human being yet? So I'm just trying to get clarification on that.
Do we know how far along she was?
Right. It doesn't say how far, but I think it was within the first 10 weeks, because the particular pill that he used was supposed to be within the first 10 weeks of
let me ask the question.
conception.
If you're driving in a car and it's you and your son, and I want to kill you, I don't want to kill your son, but I shoot the car up.
Right.
Is that attempted homicide on your son, or attempted homicide on everybody in the car?
Well, so the answer is it's attempted homicide on everybody in the car legally. However, that's a poor analogy, because in terms of this pill is not directed to harm the host.
It causes harm.
Okay, I can't.
Depending on the what he gave her, how much he gave her, and then what stage she was in, it causes harm.
fellas.
So Ayesha, you ready?
As the
You ready to
female on
flex?
the panel,
All right, go ahead.
I can't allow this conversation to continue because what? Like, how is it? Why are we even debating if this should be considered attempted homicide or not? Really?
I don't think we're debating it.
What are we?
actually,
What are we talking about?
So we're talking about, and Damon, you might
I'll
want to.
debate it. So, all right. So, I think if a crime has occurred and then we're saying it's against the mother, then that would be an aggravated assault against her.
Right.
It would not be an attempted intentional homicide of a child. She's pregnant because had she chose to abort that child, then there would be no crime committed.
Correct.
And so we have to separate. Sure, a crime has occurred, no doubt.
Okay.
And so we need to first ascertain for your argument who is the victim of your argument. If it is the woman, then that is no longer attempted homicide of her. It would be assault of her.
Okay.
If the pill used to abort the fetus was one of the abortion drugs, which do not, my understanding, do not harm the woman, then that would be it. Now, if he gave her some concoction of cyanide or whatever that could kill her as well, different ballgame. But if we're talking about a pill designed to abort a fetus in the way in which he gave her, or in the way in which it was used, just not intentional, then for the woman, you have an aggravated assault deadly weapon, for sure. A crime committed, for sure. But there is an issue to be had when we say this child is a person to be charged as a crime against him, but not for the mom. I think that's a legal issue. I actually don't think this particular conviction can stand.
Okay.
I don't
So
think
let
it's
me-
legally.
Let me ask you a
Legality, I
question.
can't, let
Hold
me
on.
just say this, I can't speak on, you're the attorney in the room, so you might be right. I can't speak on that. But the confusion for me, and maybe even like the challenges that I was having within myself is, are we even having this conversation that this is something that shouldn't have happened and it's wrong and he should be charged with something?
Well, I think
So-
maybe we are having that conversation because the
Ay, ay, ay.
question, I guess the bigger question is, we have evolved women's rights, we've evolved rights in general. The question becomes, who gets to ultimately now decide who gets to be a parent? Because there was an article in the New York Times that says, what rights do a father, someone who's going to be a father, what rights do they have? If a man does not want to be a father, are we still saying, therefore, if a woman decides she wants to have this baby, therefore he is obligated to be a part of that child's life? Now, this conversation is does a man have a right to also have a part in ending a child's life if he does not want that child?
It's not the conversation.
That's part of the
Not
conversation.
the conversation is, can I hold you down and force you to have an abortion?
That's not it. So,
That's what I'm saying.
so
In
there's
essence- in
levels.
essence, this man said, I don't want this kid. I don't care if you want it or not. So clandestine or not, he said, I'm in charge
But does
of
that
what
man
happens
have a
with your
right
body.
to have a
It would be
vote
no
in that?
different. It would be no different if he pointed a gun in her womb or he held her down and said, give her an abortion. He chose to try and end the child's life without the input of the mother, without her saying, there's a such thing as late-term abortion. So whether or not it was early or late, a woman can choose at a certain time to have an abortion. You can't choose for her. I don't even know how that.
So here's
why this is a
the
question.
problem, and I think this is what William is getting at on this one, is there are levels to this. The first level is the consideration of life or not. Because when a woman has an abortion, it is understood that by law that she's not terminating a life. That's how they justify it. She's terminating a fetus that is not given a life. If you then take this consideration that the fetus, for the purposes of abortion, is not considered an actual human life, and then apply that same standard to this man from a legal standpoint and say it's attempted murder of an unborn child, there then becomes no legal difference between what the woman does with the consent of the law to abort the child and what he did without anybody's consent in terminating that life. That's the first issue. The second issue is the right of a parent, regardless of if it's the father or the mother, to terminate without the other person's consent. The argument has always been for women, it's my body, so I have the right. And I have issues with that in terms of when it comes to two consenting adults, because that presupposes that the father, who also engaged in sexual relations with this consenting person, has no right to this life that you're now, for the purposes of this argument, you're saying a life exists. So you're allowing a woman, simply because it's her body, who consented to consensual sex, to get rid of this child that is also 50% his. There are two different levels that you're talking about here, and you can't just say, you know, it's a woman's body, and that's full stop.
That
the
could-
Yeah,
issue.
yeah, you
Well,
can.
hold on,
No,
hold on.
you absolutely
Let
can.
me make 2 points. First point to your issue of legality, right? Regardless of if the drugs were originally designed to induce abortion or not, you could take too many Tylenol and kill yourself, right? So we don't know what he gave her, how many he gave her, or what the dosage should be or whatever. We know he attempted to do something to harm something inside of her body. Second point I wanted to make. Men don't have to carry the burden of child carrying, like pregnancy or childbirth. We cannot make a decision.
You should not have an opinion of
That doesn't
whether
make sense.
a woman should carry a child because you can't do it. And as a person who has, I don't want to hear nothing any of y'all gotta say.
I mean,
Well,
it just doesn't
let's
make
open it
sense.
up. Hold on. Let's open it up to.
That opens Pandora's
Yeah,
box.
hold on.
Because then after the,
Even
Honestly.
even from a parent's perspective,
This is very true.
even from a parent's perspective, right? As a man, you physically cannot control how you actually grow the baby inside of it, or any of the things that come with pregnancy or child labor. It's the same way if a man rapes a woman and produces a child, he took away her choice, right? A man can inflict something on a woman, but he cannot carry the same burden that she has to carry. So he should not have the ability to make a decision when he cannot. He just physically cannot take the consequences of the decision.
Well,
And
she
aside from all
she
that-
also chose. That's
I'm
why I
not arguing
separated
that she
rape.
didn't
That's why
choose.
I separated sexual assault from all other things,
But I mean-
because that's a choice. Let's open it up to the audience because we have one now. Are there any questions or comments from any of our audience members on this? And it's chock full of women, so
Ladies.
surely,
Ladies, you have something to say.
who wants the floor to say something?
I'll say something.
You'll say something. Go ahead.
I think that on this topic, I'm sorry, Aisha,
Yes.
you were correct. This topic probably should have been bypassed, although you all's opinions do matter, but when it comes to a woman's body, I just feel like men will never understand, and for you all to, go on and on, it almost really doesn't even matter. On this topic though, I mean, I hear you, but I just feel like you all will never, no.
so the
I guess the
question I
question
still
for you,
have.
do you feel like you can never have an opinion on a man's body then as well?
On a man's body?
Yeah, like if we have an issue about something to do with men's health, do you think you can not have an opinion about that as well?
Men's health, I mean, it just varies exactly what we're talking about. Are we talking about from a prostate exam or something as basic to something like a common cold?
Well,
It just depends the circumstance.
Why should it depend?
Yeah, because,
does
because
depend.
You made a comment about like it's a woman's body, we can have an opinion on it, and I'm not saying you're right or wrong, but I'm saying if the converse is not true, if you feel like you can have in any way, for any reason, an opinion on a man's body, then I don't see why there's gonna be a limiting factor there.
So let me be specific. As far as a woman's pregnancy, I don't feel like that, like for instance, just going strictly about what you were saying that how a man, I don't remember, I do remember, but you were saying that a man, if it's his child, it shouldn't be just strictly up to the woman to say I'm gonna have this baby.
In a
You were
cons-
saying
in-
that she
in-
had to say so, right?
Specifically in cases where two consenting adults have had sex and there was a conception that occurred.
And if the woman wants an abortion, you feel like the man should have a say so of you can or you can't.
Correct. Either way, if the man wants an abortion and the woman doesn't, I think there should be two people that have to say yes to that abortion before that abortion occurs when two consenting adults have conceived a child, regardless of if it's man or woman.
Okay, so
But if-
strictly just on women's pregnancy, in some ways, all of this has to do with the instance. Strictly on women's pregnancy though, and just going as far as, and then too, just the man, I feel like the charge is accurate when you get into a legal standpoint. I don't know about that part yet, but
Hey, rock on, sister.
but it should have been aggravated assault. Who knows what that pill could have did to the woman?
Agreed.
You
I think we all
know,
agree
so
on that.
I think that the charge is stick. You killed a child. You had harmful intent. It is what it is. you know, but
And
But
finally,
that can't be enough though.
let me say this. Let me make it very relevant for you guys. If I gave you a vasectomy because I decided that we should get a vasectomy, we married Kevin, and I think I'm done having kids, and you should have a vasectomy. I'm going to do that without your knowledge. You like that?
Well, he didn't give
Is
her a
that okay?
hysterectomy without her
Right.
No,
Because
it's
that-
not a
because-
it's not a hysterectomy, but it's a choice
But it
that
could've
he's making
resulted
for
in a
her body.
hysterectomy.
Regardless, it's a choice that he's making for her body without her consent. Now, sure, they agreed on it. Kevin said, "Yeah, I want to get a vasectomy," and I just did it. He went to sleep. I got the procedure done, and here we are with this ism. And whether it's a hysterectomy and she cannot have a baby again, or she can have another baby, this baby she cannot have because he made the decision to take that away from her and her body. So you tell me, can I do that to you? Would you like that?
But once again, there's a separate
Legally,
argument
I
here
don't have
between this abortion situation and a hysterectomy. He didn't give her a hysterectomy, and I think once again we all agree charges committed and any assault upon her should definitely be prosecuted. But there is an argument, a legal argument that's been made here about how is life defined. Because if life is defined one way, then that is how it is defined. And so with abortions, it's defined by age of viability. That's the Supreme Court test, age of viability. Right now it's at 23 weeks. But if technology progresses to where age of viability drops to, let's say, 12 weeks, then no woman can get an abortion before 12 weeks. And if technology progresses to where age of viability is at immediately upon conception, then nobody, male or female, will be able to get a abortion, because Supreme Court has ruled age of viability, which is not like 25 weeks. It's just however technology can work to keep a child alive outside the womb.
So let me ask a question then. If age of viability is 23 weeks and she was 10 weeks from giving birth, she was past the age of viability.
She was 10 weeks pregnant.
She was only 10 weeks.
She was only
Right,
10
okay.
weeks pregnant.
Got it.
Yeah.
So can I ask this? Is this a question about parental rights? Is this like, did he not want the child, and so therefore that was why he?
I'm pretty sure he didn't want it because he tried to
So
kill it
I
off.
mean, granted.
But-
So and I guess to that point is maybe the question is should not, or the conversation shouldn't be really around what he did, because we can all agree that is problematic. I guess the question for me is, if she decided, or any woman decides to have a baby, and we can even use the reverse. If a woman does not want a child and the man does, and she has the baby, if any parent does not want to be party to this child, are we allowing them to remove themselves from the parental rights and from any litigation, from child support, any responsibility? Because to me, that influences a decision like this. This man maybe feels like, I'm about to be paying child support for the next 20 years. I don't want that responsibility. I don't want to be party to this. And I'm being forced to, because legally the system says she gets to make that decision and I have no say so in it.
And Ayesha, I mean, maybe you can answer that question. Should a man, if you decide you want an abortion, and a man's, I'm sorry, if you decide you want to go ahead to term with the pregnancy, and the man says, I don't want this child from get-go, should he then be forced to be in that child's life?
Can't force anybody to do anything.
Well, sure we can. We can put them in jail for not allowed.
Well, I'm sorry.
I think this is just one of those double standards that it's just going to exist, and all parties
we
just have to
can stack
accept
the
it.
deck with double standards
Right.
against
Yeah.
women.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. There's always going to be a double standard for one side or the other. That's just, sometimes you just have to accept that that's just the way it's going to be.
Well, speaking of stacking the deck, the deck has always been stacked against minorities while we're sleeping, while we're driving, while we're barbecuing, while we're trying to get into universities, and just recently, while someone was trying to enter into their own condo, which would be black man tried to enter his home in St. Louis late Friday. De'Arian Tolles was accosted by a young lady, Miss Mueller. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but I'm sorry, Hillary Brooke Mueller, asking him if he belonged in the vicinity of his home. Now, he started recording. He was very, very, very polite about everything he did. She followed him to his home.
She had to be. She's a white woman.
And I think she tried to actually come in the house. At that point, he was like, whoa, all right, I got to stop you right there. You can't come in. So some black people are irritated because he was too nice and he's been too civil about this, and he says, you know, I'd still have this conversation with her. Ms. Mueller has since been fired from her job. I don't know when these Caucasians, predators, will learn that at some point the tide is changing, at least in terms of social media presence, that you can't act the way you want to act when the camera comes on. But hatred will be hatred no matter what. At some point, there's the Malcolm X versus the Martin Luther King opinion on how to handle these situations. You've got the Malcolm that says, beat him. And then you got the Martin that says, no, let's turn the other cheek and let's speak to him. Where are we right now with this?
So let me tell you this. My wife is going to disagree with what I'm about to say in some respects. I believe that there are appropriate times to put your hands on people. I think there are appropriate times if somebody got to get beat, you should beat them. Now, I am never going to hit a woman, right? But I would hope if my wife is with me and that shit happens, she's got to the plate for her brother. So while I'm being civil, she can do her thing and I got her back, right? And the second shit pop off, and I'll put my camera down, I'll stop recording. And I let her get to work on this because you can't let that shit fly. You know, civility is great and it's fantastic, and we should always try the civil approach first. But at a certain point, when you're blocking me getting in this house, and this is like a upscale, low scale, whatever, I pay for this. It's my doggone money. I'm trying to go home from work. Yes, ma'am, I'm not going to touch you, but if I got my lady by my side, I would hope I would look at her and she would jump in front of me. And so as a funny story, kind of similar situation. When my wife was giving birth, she looked at me because a nurse was trying to give her an IV and she didn't want an IV. Didn't want the damn IV. Kept trying to give her an IV. She didn't want it, And so while she's giving birth, she looked up at me with those eyes that said, honey, help me. And so I made a decision that day, like, hey, I'm not getting arrested. But I had to restrain that lady from touching my wife and giving the doggone needle. There are times when you have to do what you got to do. And I think he certainly, if I was him, I wouldn't have touched that woman. I wouldn't have done anything like that because, you know, you just can't do that. But if I had my lady with me, I would hope that she would have. I would hope that she would step up and put that woman in her place.
So you wouldn't have given her a stern shaking?
I wanted to.
I think he handled it. I think he handled it perfectly. I actually watched the video today. I think he handled it perfectly in a totally different way than I would have handled it. I would have been on the news going to jail. But he handled it perfectly, like by recording her and showing just how insane it was that she had the caucasity and the audacity to think that she belonged in this place and he did not, simply because he didn't look the part of what she thought belonged in that building. Was just showing how stupid she was. He knew he knew his rights. He knew what he should have done. He walked past her. He didn't do anything that could have gotten him, made her look like the victim instead of him. Because I would have gave it a Heisman. Like, I'd have put my hands on it immediately. I'd have been like, you got to get out of my way. So
I mean, sometimes people need
I would have just pushed past her. Like, you get one chance to get in my way.
I don't know how you stayed that long and had that
Yeah,
conversation.
I would have. She would have got knocked out of the
When
way.
it would have been all that, I would have like, excuse me, and walked to the
Right.
elevator. Now I'm 6'4", 270 pounds, so that just don't generally happen. But I'm not gonna stay there and have a conversation.
Well, I think he wanted it to be on social media. That's
Probably.
why.
That's
why he
smart.
did it, which
Because I
was
don't know why,
smart. Yeah.
with that little bitty dog and this little bitty lady, and she's standing in this door trying to stop him, and he's a grown man. No, sorry, bro.
I think that he handled it very gracefully. I think that anything different would have added more fuel to the fire of racial tension within, forget the country, social media. I mean, we look on social media, there's plenty of examples of this happening. And so I think it shows others that we can be disrespected and still handle ourselves with grace and with class, and we know that. My people know that, but other people don't. And what people typically see is the very angry of us. And I think that it's very nice that he was able to compose himself and show them, I belong here. I don't need to prove that to you, and look at me so refined.
You know, that's cute and all, but at some point, don't you just want to just beat somebody in the ground? I mean, goddamn, at some point, we got to get irritated with being the bigger person. I'm tired of being the bigger person in every situation. Like, just because, we have to prove to them that we're docile, we're meek, we're not going to be fighters. We've shown them that.
You can get mad, but you can get mad, but you can't get too mad.
That's
right?
not- that's-
Can I get mad
you can
enough
tell
to,
them-
like,
you can tell them
trip
you're
her?
supposed to be, you can't tell them in a way that, you know, in a way that you want to tell them. That's the part that, like, I was, like, really upset watching that, just putting myself in that guy's place to feel like no matter where you go, right? And this has happened to me and probably happened to many of us, like no matter where you go, you have to try and comport yourself as the better person. You have to show that you have education and you were raised right and you're not this kind of person, all because somebody else steps out of line. That's the part that, like, infuriates me, to think that not at work, not some policeman, not some bad situation. I'm just trying to go home, man.
It's frustrating.
Like, I'm just trying to walk in my house.
And it-
And
but I-
and it-
I-
it's
questions
very
I mean,
I think
frustrating.
it begs a bigger question too, why we constantly are, we've equated progress as putting ourselves in hostile places as some determinant of progress. So I'm the first black at Yale, but there's a noose at my door every day. This is what we've deemed as progress. And so to some degree, you have to ask yourself, at what point do we start to say, why haven't we started to buy and build our own communities? You know, we scream about gentrification, but then a lot of us as black professionals, the first thing we do when we get a good job is we running out of the black neighborhood, and then we look back like, what's wrong back here? Like, why aren't y'all picking yourselves up and getting out as well? We forced this man and a lot of us to go live in hostile environments. I'm thankful that I live in Third Ward, and when I walk out of my door, there are other black professionals that look like me, and that if I leave my home, I can still leave my door unlocked. And that if someone's at my door, my neighbor is calling me, hey, who's coming to visit you? You know? And so to some degree, I don't know how to relate to his experience unless I go visit my parents who live in a white neighborhood where, you know, even me and my business partner, when we've been out working, because the majority of our clients have to be white, because our business is primarily not something that a lot of African Americans would use, we've been followed around neighborhoods. You know, we've had the police called on us multiple times. And so, and we know this, you know, and as much as we would love to be like, you know what, we're gonna focus our business on the black community, that's not our reality. And so to some degree, we really do have to ask ourselves, is there no place that brother could live that would be safe for him? Is it a problem that we build our own communities and build safe places for ourselves and build our own institutions? So it does become, I get the conversation that we should, you know, it's one thing, you should be able to fight for your right to be anywhere. My mentor said, fight for your right to be anywhere, but don't leave home, you know, and build home.
William, you're putting the cart before the horse. We're gonna get to this financial part of this in a second, because there's a lot more to be said. And Garrick, I know you want to talk about it, and we will talk about it shortly. But before we get there, we still got a little bit to talk about, such as Chief Justice Roberts is calling for a federal investigation of Kavanaugh and his ethics. So we know that we have a new justice on the Supreme Court. This is Justice Brett Kavanaugh, who was just put through last week after a haranguing by the Senate committee. In this particular instance, now, first of all, over 51% of the American population has said that they don't approve of this justice being on the court. That being said, the people that put him there, the Senate committee, doesn't represent the majority of the Senate that actually wanted him put through in the first place. We also have an unpopular president who, by popular vote, nominated him, but he wasn't our popular vote president. So put all these things together, this is the first time in history that there is a Supreme Court justice put on the bench that, for all the parameters that are necessary to say for the people and by the people, he doesn't fit that quota. Chief Justice Roberts said that he wants an investigation, not only because he feels like the issues that he presented during his nomination hearing showed that he was unfit from a temperament standpoint, but he had over a dozen ethics complaints against him as a sitting appellate court judge, which was completely glossed over because we were worried about, and rightfully so, we were worried about this Ford issue and the other sexual assault issues. This is the first time I think that we've actually had a justice say, once another sitting justice comes on, I don't know if you should be here. And this puts us in a precarious position. I mean, I don't know if we, you don't think so?
No.
I mean, because unless he gets disbarred,
there's nothing-
unless the ethics come out and he is.
You don't think that's a potential?
So let me tell you when I was in law school, what my ethics professor told us. He said, you can have sex with a client, you can kill a client, you can heal a client,
Just don't
just
take
don't
their
steal
money.
from them.
Yep.
As long as you don't steal from them, you'll be okay. And that is the ethics of and probably most people who have a fiduciary duty, accountants, lawyers, doctors, for the most part, not doctors, but accountants, lawyers, engineers, as long as you don't steal, I mean, ethically you might get in a little trouble, but you won't lose your license. Unless his license is revoked, he's gonna be the Supreme Court justice. So at this point, we need to go ahead and move on, and let's just, I mean, I don't want him there. I don't want him there, but let's just move on and just move on.
Because, I was having this conversation the other day, there seems to be some confusion about who can be a Supreme Court justice as well. Like, there's really a belief in this country that you have to have gone to law school, you have to be a lawyer to become a Supreme Court justice. And the way the amendment and stuff is written, the president can pick whoever he wants to. If he wants to pick Billy Bob down the street in the trailer park, that's who he can pick. So this kind of still goes back to this conversation about we are paying for our all-in strategy on the Democrat side, and now you have a president like Trump who gets to decide not one, but probably at least 2 Supreme Court justices before he leaves office.
Well, he's already decided to.
So even more coming, right? So I mean, you know, again, I hate to say it, I don't think there's much we can do about it. The only thing you can do about it is prepare for 2020. I would love to see the Republicans run somebody, but I don't think anybody's ever run against an incumbent in a party. So, you know, the question might be, what do you need to do for 2020 and then 2024?
Now, what do we need to do for 2018?
I was gonna say, I was just going through 2018, no matter how you vote, you know, if you change the face of Congress, then you change the face of a lot of things. And
But do
that's-
you
that's
have
November.
moderates anymore? And this could fly into a whole other conversation, but part of the problem, at least as I see it in the political realm right now, is there are very few moderates. So there's not a lot of crossing of the aisle. There used to be a thing called conservative blue dogs, who were Democrats, typically in the South, who may vote Republican from the time. You have Republican moderates who would come over to the Democrat side. We've really killed moderate politicians in this country. So you're either extreme left or you're extreme right, even though the majority of the country still exists in the middle.
Yeah,
The
if you look
majority
at,
of the country's,
if you
and
look
so,
at values,
Another party.
We need no parties.
We need a minority party
No
that's
party.
specific to minority interests.
Party.
well, when you say minority party, because see, you have to be real careful when you say that, because that's also the term people of color and a whole bunch of other things that get us in trouble a lot of times. Because one of the problems, so I do a lot of HBCU endowment research, and there was a donation given to the University of Southern California, one of the biggest African-American donations at the time, and it was for education. Well, the term said, it basically said $25 million to the Department of Education for minorities in PhDs in education, which meant that the way we term minority in this country, it's everybody but a white man.
Right.
So everybody could have got that scholarship, and it didn't have to be one African American receive that scholarship. So I think when we say a minority party, we kind of need to, most of us typically think Black and Latino when we say that, but the reality is minority encompasses a lot in this country, and so we have to be careful with labels sometimes.
when you label a minority, usually the biggest beneficiary is Caucasian women.
Yeah.
Well, I can guarantee you if everybody in this minority party starts showing up and they look around like, whoa, I don't think I feel comfortable with this minority, people will sift themselves out in a heartbeat when it comes to, do I belong to this label? But, I mean, I get what you're saying on that. Financially speaking, we're in a place right now where we're headed towards, economists say that we're headed towards another recession, even worse than the Great Depression, with Mr. Trump at the helm. We've got all these finance people, specifically you, Garrick, we'll start with you. What do you think we're heading towards right now? Do you see the trend going towards another bubble bursting?
Well, that's a complicated question, but
Well, I'm a complicated man.
like Shaft. So the thing is, I'll relate it back to African American people. So one thing we have to start doing is understanding the economic cycle, what's called the economic cycle. When you're talking about the economic cycle, you're usually going to be in one of three phases. You're either going to be in a recession, you're going to be in a growth period, or you're going to be in a stagnant period. So if you look at the U.S. economy since 2008 or maybe 2009, we've been in a high growth period, and it's like a wheel. So think about it: when you have growth, then you have a recession, then you have stagnation, then you have growth, and it just keeps going around in a circle. And as we've gone through this last 10 plus years, we've basically had unprecedented growth. Now, a lot of that, it really doesn't have much to do with the president per se. It's more so based on the Federal Reserve. What the Federal Reserve has done is essentially say, okay, we're in a recession. We need to inject some life back into the economy. The way they do that is they say, okay, we're going to lower the interest rate, which allows for large lending institutions to borrow money from the Federal Reserve, which they in turn lend out to people to buy homes, business loans, different things like that, and they're able to charge a higher interest rate on that, but make a lot of profit on it because they don't have to pay that money back to the Federal Reserve. So what we have to do is we have to say, okay, if we're in a recession, if we're in a growth period, and we know that we're going into a recession, what things typically do well? What investments typically do well when you're in a recession? It's usually going to be things that are considered secure. So you got things like certain types of bonds, treasury bills, currencies, things like that. As African American people, to relate that back to us is we just don't understand that. So what we do is when the recession hits, we see housing values going down. We're losing money in our 401ks or IRAs or whatever retirement vehicle we have. And so we just throw our hands up in the air and say, I'm done. This stuff doesn't work. These white people just taking all our money. That's what we do. On the flip side, people who understand how it works, they say, okay, during the growth phase, the stock market is going up. So I had my money in the stock market, and now we're going into a recession. So now I know, okay, I need to move my money from the stock market over to bonds, and I need to start buying bonds. Okay, I know that during the recession, housing prices fall. So instead of me going and flipping a house, maybe I need to look at, oh, now I can buy homes and rehab them and turn them into rental properties and make income off of it. When the wheel turns again and then things become stagnant, then what you do is you move your money into cash. You sit back and you wait for things to either reverse back to go towards growth or reverse back to the direction it was before. It's just a matter of understanding how the market works and just how the overall economy progresses through that cycle that I just mentioned.
Well, Ayesha, one thing that has always bothered me is when we look at housing, and as Garrick was talking about, when we're talking about real estate investments, we have been able to put a dollar amount on how much black people are worth based off of comps in a black area. And then when gentrification happens, all of a sudden prices start to go back up because now the black element is leaving, the white element is coming in. How do we revalue ourselves in terms of real estate?
So I think for Kevin and I, one of our core beliefs is that we're very angry and impassioned about gentrification, but we feel like we should be a part of the gentrification. There's the whole conversation about buying the block, which is great, but in its immediacy, what we can do is buy something. So we can't, if we can't control gentrification, then we absolutely should be a part of the gentrification. So make sure you keep your grandma's house and that we're pulling together our resources so that we can keep ownership in our communities.
But isn't that easier said than done when grandma's house is going to be valued at $100,000, but grandma and the kids have $50,000 worth of debt that they're trying to come up from under?
So a collective would be great, so that people who look like us, who do look like us, can come back and rescue those houses out of the community. Because some investor is going to come and pick that up, whether it goes to tax court or to an auction. So if there are African American investors who can come in and be a part of that, then that still keeps it in the hands of people that look
Let
like
me say something about that, because I'm usually not an emotional person, as we've already established, but that is something that I'm really emotional about. And here's the reason why. The two primary ways that wealth can be transferred within a family, or just anyone, tax-free, key word, tax-free, is real estate and life insurance. I want to focus on the second one, which is life insurance. Now, you just mentioned something. You said, well, what do you do when grandmother has, or big mama has, $50,000 of debt, and her home is worth $100,000, and now the grandkids or the parents have to figure out, okay, how are we going to pay off this debt and then still be able to retain the home? That goes back to life insurance. African American people typically don't have life insurance, and when they do have it, they either don't have the right kind or they do not have enough. You're basically missing out on an opportunity to transfer money to your heirs tax-free. Now, that requires a little bit of unselfishness and forward thinking on our part, and sometimes you have to step outside of yourself and say, okay, I'm not going to worry about, if I get this, does this mean that something's going to happen to me? You have to say, look at who are you modeling yourself after? So if you look at wealthy people and you look at how they transfer wealth, it's those two ways, and they set up what's called legal trust, where they take that money, life insurance proceeds, it flows into a trust, and then that trust pays out money periodically to the heirs of whoever that trust is. We're not doing that. We're not even having that conversation. No one is even really talking to us about that. And when they do talk, when we do hear it, it's usually in passing on a commercial or something we see on television. So at a point we have to say, okay, I need to make sure that when I'm no longer here, that everyone who is left behind is not just taken care of, but we leave a situation better than it was before we left. So things should be better. When you pass away, someone should be getting wealthy.
So let me just, I want to pose just a question, because I hear a lot of people say this. So with the experts on the panel, there are a lot of people that think, I can't do that, I can't prepare, I don't need a will, I don't need life insurance because I don't have a lot of money. Can you talk about when you can start thinking about that, and what it requires for somebody to have it? Because I think a lot of people don't look at investing and things like that because they think, I don't have enough money or I don't make enough money.
Okay, so that's two questions. That's life insurance and that's investing. So since we were just talking about life insurance, I'll start with that one first. Here are the people that should have life insurance: anyone who has debt, anyone who has dependents, and anyone who's going to die.
So
That's it.
so everybody
That's
here.
everybody.
Okay,
Right.
bet.
I'm not gonna die, so.
Right. Well, you're a pro, so yeah.
I don't plan on it either.
Right. Yeah. So if you fall in one of those three categories, then you should have life insurance. Now, as far as pricing goes, believe it or not, life insurance is not expensive. I'm looking around the room. Most of us are either college educated or soon to be graduating, and that should not be that conversation. It shouldn't even be one that we have. It should be, okay, if the choice is getting cable or getting life insurance, it should be getting life insurance. That shouldn't even be a conversation.
I want to give a personal case study for that.
Okay.
When my oldest daughter was born, I was 20 years old. I was actively in school. I was actually going to UHD at the time, and I took out a 30-year life insurance policy at 20 years old. It was $17 a month.
Right.
Now that was $150,000 when I started. By the time, and even now, I have about a $3 million term life insurance policy, in addition to disability and other life insurances we have through our business and just work and personal. The cost is nothing compared to the risk of you dying. As a black man, a tall black man in America, I know I'm gonna die.
You're gonna trip
I
on a
know
rock
I'm
or something.
probably gonna die before the age of 70. So I know, hey, I'm 32. About 40 years, I'm probably gonna be out of here. So I want to make sure that my girls are taken care of well in advance of me getting rich or wealthy or having, you know, stacks of cash sitting in the safe at my house. I want to make sure that if it all stops tomorrow, they're taken care of. And the cost of that is not a car note, it ain't a cell phone bill, it's not a cable bill. It's extremely small compared to what you risk if you have absolutely nothing. And
I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's easy. Like, technology's made it easy. You can go on direct, what is it?
Yeah,
Something
there's a
like
million
Insurance
of
Direct.
them,
It's a
yeah.
million sites that you could get a policy, at least term, you're young, you're healthy, you're in school, you're whatever, and take care of your family.
When you say term, what do you mean by term?
Because there's actual term,
Okay.
like a 30-year versus 20-year.
Okay, so
Oh,
term
you want
life
him?
insurance.
My bad. My bad.
I actually have life insurance. Okay.
But you're not gonna die,
Let
though.
me give a brief explanation. Term life insurance, for folks without a bunch of money, you can't pay a huge life insurance amount every month. Term life insurance is perfect for you. So what it is it's essentially life insurance for a set amount for a certain period of time, and it's based on your health and your age at the time in which you get it, and it does not change. Now, you can convert it later, right? But let's say I was 20 years old, I got a 30-year policy. So that policy for $17 a month, I'm gonna pay $17 a month until I'm 50. Now, when I'm 50, that policy goes away. So hopefully between the ages of 20 and 50, I do something with my money so that I can get either investments or different things that pay something, or I get whole life insurance or something different to continue past 50. But just to cover me, I got $17 a month, and I want to make sure I pay that $17 a month. Same way you pay your iPhone bill, or you pay that extra $10 charge, Sprint gonna charge you for data. Whatever you're doing, you want to make sure you're paying for your future first, because that's most important.
Now, why would you get term if you feel like you won't die soon? Because didn't you say it goes away?
It goes away, but
Well, that's a
statistically,
strategy.
what are the chances that a 20-year-old black man dies in America before the age of 50?
Well, that's what the question is going to be for somebody who's wanting. If someone is going to say, well, get this, because a lot of people will come and sell insurance packages and they'll sell you what's cheapest and what's going to help them out. We got this 30-year term life insurance for you. You're 25 years old. You never know what's going to happen to you. You're paying on it for the next several years. So now you spent thousands of dollars on something that at the end of the day may not see you reap any benefits from. So what would be your suggestion on term versus whole life insurance?
Okay, so we have to separate a couple things. First off, when you're buying term insurance, you are getting a benefit of it. It's so if when you're paying your car insurance and your policy expires at the end of whatever, if it's 9 months or 12 months, you don't sit back and say, I just paid this for 12 months and they're not going to give me my money back, right? For some reason, and this is and I'm not saying you're doing this. I know you're just giving an example. This is a
like
big
you said,
issue within the African American community. Why should I pay all this money towards term life insurance and then at the end I don't see any benefit from it? Well, the reason why you don't feel like you saw a benefit from it was because you didn't actually employ an optimal strategy when you bought the insurance. So the optimal strategy is to say, okay, I bought this life insurance and it was $300,000 and it was a 30-year policy. So once you buy it, at the end of 30 years, you should have $300,000 in cash. You should have, whether it was set up some type of an investment, some type of aggressive savings, you should have accumulated that money so you become what's called self-insured. Now, some people don't do that. And so what happens is they reach the end of that time frame and then in their mind they say, oh, it did not work. I shouldn't have listened to whoever sold me that. So whenever you keep in mind, whenever you're buying insurance, insurance is just one part of the puzzle. It also involves investing, which goes back to the question you asked earlier. People say, well, I don't have enough money to invest. And when someone says they don't have enough money to invest, I commonly ask them, well, what do they think is a lot of money or is enough money to invest? Well, I don't know, $100. And I'm like, okay, so you're saying $100 is what you need to be able to invest? Yeah. So you don't have $100? No. Well, do you have 25? Oh yeah, I got $25. Okay, well, let's start investing $25 every month. Okay, do you have 50? Okay, let's start investing 50. Okay, you're 22 years old. Okay, maybe you're doing 25 now. Where do you think you'll be when you're 30? Okay, maybe when you're 30 now you can do 100. When you're 40, okay, maybe now you can do 500. I'll give a personal example. My wife and I, when we first met each other, I was broke. Like, by my standard, I still feel like I'm broke. But when we met each other, I was really broke. And my wife and I, we said, okay, we got together. This is what we're going to do. We're going to pay down XYZ debt. We're going to get this amount of life insurance, and we're going to invest this amount of money. And that's what we've been doing. If I pass away today, my wife will get $2 million tax-free. So if something happens to me after I leave out of here, all of y'all are witnesses. I know she's watching this podcast, Maria.
So she married up. Is what you're saying.
Well, and so the point is, I want everybody to know it's a strategy. It's not one thing. It's not just investing. It's not just insurance. It's all put together. So you should have a full strategy.
So, William, let me ask you something because you're quiet over there. Ayesha talked about when dealing with the investment opportunities, maybe sometimes we should work as a collective. Why is it that we don't see more black venture capitalists in holdings programs where we're coming together as a collective venture investment group?
So I'm a big believer in black institutionalism. Us being in this room is somewhat, the sorority that's AKA is a black institution. You've got a lot of black institutions. And so what you don't have, though, is a thought process about the cohesion of that ecosystem, right? So everybody's kind of doing their own thing. The AKs do their own thing, the Sigmas do their own thing, Deltas do their own thing. So my uncle is a Sigma, and one of his chief complaints, and he may be in his 80s, but he and I talked a lot about this problem. And it's one of these questions of why is there not more unity in what we're doing? And so his thought was the last few years that the Sigmas have had their conference in DC, they've had issues with hotels, right? People, because if you know about DC is becoming very gentrified. And so they have not been able to, sometimes, if they do get a hotel, it's overpriced. I went to a CIAA school, so those who know about the CIAA, we have a big tournament sometimes in Charlotte. They've seen price gouging. So his statement to me was, why haven't the Divine Nine got together and bought a hotel or bought a building in DC and built our own hotel? And that's a great question, because a lot of it to me is we don't think about ourselves as part of an ecosystem. We're one part, so you have all these different entities, the black church, you have historically black colleges, you have black neighborhoods, everybody's operating at a silo. So like one of the things me and Garrick did that was very important to us when we started our business, we immediately went and opened a bank account at Unity Bank. Because we want not only our black business, we want a black bank account, and as we grow, we're hoping to tie ourselves, even our shirts come from a black producer out of New York. So we've been very purposeful about integrating ourselves. And a lot of us, sometimes we just think, oh, if I go eat at the restaurant, that's buying black. No, you need the black farmer. Like, you have to think about this thing in a very vertical scale. Because while we have $1 trillion in buying power, what does that really mean at the end of the day? What does it really, because a dollar does not stay in our community even a day. Most of us know that, right? And so you do have to be very purposeful. Why is it that we're not working together? Because everything is disjointed that we do. So, when we go into the bank now, we are more apt to see, we may run into another black business owner and say, what are you working on? You know, even at my alma mater, which is a black college in Virginia, I'm pushing them now to do more joint exercises with black banks in that area, so that, you know, our students are leaving school and working to build black banks, right? And so you need this constant friction or feeding of each other. That's how opportunities create themselves. That's really what Silicon Valley is.
Give them the unemployment.
Unemployment. Okay, so if there's almost 2 million African American owned companies and businesses in America, only 100,000 of those have more than one employee, right? So 1.9 million black owned businesses have one employee. If each one of them hired just one person, the unemployment rate for blacks would be under 3%. Okay? So that's what, when we're talking about not working together and everybody's kind of in their own silo, that's what we're talking about. Because there's not a purposeful strategy here to say, I'm going to graduate from college, I'm going to try my best to work for a black-owned company and help it build so that it grows and then we can hire more African Americans. I'm going to put my money in a black bank. So like one of my big pushes in life is to see black colleges move their money to black banks. Because it is insane that black colleges don't bank with black banks. And we're losing black banks every year. We went from over 50 in the 80s, and now we're down to under 20. That could easily be stopped and resolved if black colleges moved billions of dollars into these institutions.
But isn't part of the problem, though, that when a new company comes in, they have to now compete against the bigger markets who can undercut them and then price them out? They aren't afforded really the opportunity to stay in there long term a lot of times, because you've got the company saying, okay, bet y'all want to go ahead and get in here with us, we'll let you play for a little while until you start infringing on our market share. And at that point,
it becomes that thing. Everybody wants to be the chief and nobody wants to be the Indian. Okay, one of the issues, so Carver Bank is what was the largest African American owned bank back in the 90s. It got in some trouble in the 2008 crisis. One United, which is now the largest African American owned bank, came to them with a merger proposal.
Which is where I bank.
Congratulations. Everybody should. But they wouldn't do it because the CEO at the time she didn't want to give up her CEO seat. So now, because there was no reason for it. Even at one point, BET had approached Radio 1 to merge. Kathy Hughes didn't want to do it, right? And so now, who listens to the radio? Anybody? Maybe one. I still do because I'm always not many, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, we don't merge and we don't scale up. To your point, we have kind of created this, we'd rather be the small fish in a small pond than, as Garrett would say, be at least a medium-sized fish in a big pond, right? But that involves merging, that involves scaling, that involves saying, I don't have to be the CEO. I can own 10% and just sit at home or sit on the beach and drink Long Island iced teas as I would drink or something like that. But it is one of those things. It's being willing to put ego aside and just say, listen, we need to grow and we need to merge and we need to scale up so that we can do bigger things so that we're not priced out of the market a lot of times.
Damon, you have a question?
You actually have two questions. First one is, and I struggle with this myself, the desire to invest versus the obligation of debt. So how do you, what would be y'all's resolution to solve that? Like, should I go ahead and invest whilst I have debt? Or should I pay the debt first? Or how do you strike a balance? That's one. And then my next question is, what do you guys recommend as the best way for each individual person to unify funds with whatever we have to create whatever financial, maybe not a bank or I don't know what that will look like, but whatever vehicle we can put our money together to make money.
Kevin, you look like you're biting at the bit to answer this one.
So we just had this conversation actually a couple of weeks ago. So it's a prime example, right? And we're planning for next year. We're looking at different things, but essentially, what we were talking about was if somebody handed you $200,000 right now, what would you do with it? Would you pay down debt, or would you acquire additional assets? So just in our household, to be transparent, we have student loans, we have things that we want to pay off. So we said, and I did the numbers for Ayesha. I said, okay, if we had $200,000, we could pay off all our student loans, we could pay off cars, we could, basically reduce our monthly debt obligations $1,000.
Right.
But
That's a better way.
if I buy a 50-unit
Yep.
apartment building, I increase my income $5,000. So save $1,000, make $5,000. Because if I make $5,000 more, I can pay that $1,000 extremely easily, and I still net $4,000 on top of that. So should we pay down debt? That's directly correlates to how your money's invested, what you plan on doing with your money, and if paying down debt saves you more money than you could make with that money in the instance that you had that money working, right? So for everybody who's worried about car notes or student loans or whatever, it's directly tied to how your money's performing. Because if you made more money, then your debt obligation, the burden of that would be much less.
One thing you also have to consider is it's a psychological exercise when we're talking about African American people. So traditionally, African American people are risk averse. We are very fearful of losing it all, and we also are. So as a result, what happens is when we have some debt and we come into some money, the first thing that enters our mind is,
We're at a strip club.
let's pay off this debt,
Pay off the
and
debt.
I'll never have to worry about
That too.
paying this money again. So I always ask people this: if you had a hypothetical person standing right here and a hypothetical person standing over here, which one would you rather be? Person A has $100,000 of debt, but they have $200,000 of income. Person B has zero debt and they have $100,000 of income. So in your mind, you're probably thinking, well,
It's 100,000, 100,000.
it's 100,000, it's 100,000 each, right? Okay, yeah, right. Got it? Okay, all right. So if you, in your mind, that's what you're saying, then what other factors are there to consider? If this person has $200,000 of income and $100,000 of debt, and they have $100,000 of income, how are they making their money? Are they making their money because they have investments? If you have investments, that means your money is going to continually grow, right? If you're over here and you're making your money and you just don't have any debt, and every time you get paid your money, you just say, okay, I'm going to shovel it on paying off this debt, then someone who actually has assets coming in, they will always beat you. And I'll use enemy number one as an example. So Donald Trump. Boo, I know, yeah. So let's use Donald Trump as an example.
Can we call him like Agent X? So we
Yeah,
just
let's
have
call
to
him
say the word
Agent
Donald
Orange
Trump?
X.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
Agent Orange. So Agent Orange, there's a big deal about why won't he release his taxes? All the other presidential candidates, and all of them release their taxes. Why won't he? I'm going to explain to you why he won't release his taxes. This is like no one has ever really mentioned this. So Donald Trump's business model is, and we all know it's in real estate, right? His primary business model. So he basically acquires land, builds hotels and resorts, or redevelops hotels and resorts. And as a result, to do that, he acquires debt. So he'll go buy some land for $1 million and he'll redevelop it, and he'll owe $1.5 million on it, but he'll get $10 million of income. So you take the 1.5 from the 10 million, he's making $8.5 million. Well, he literally has in his portfolio billions upon billions upon billions of dollars of debt that he owes on all of this property and assets that he has. But he makes hundreds of millions of dollars every single month on it. So if he were to release his taxes, the media, being smart, because that's not their guy, they would say, okay, let's get the people to focus on the billions and billions of dollars of debt that he has. He has billions and billions of dollars of debt. Would you want a president with billions and billions of dollars of debt? And most people, obviously the answer would be like, no, he can't even manage his own finances. But they won't say, okay, he has $10 billion in debt, but he makes $1 billion in income. So think about that whenever you're saying, okay, should I pay off my debt? Should I get some assets? It really just depends. If getting assets is going to make you more money than you would save by paying off your debt, then go get the assets.
Yeah.
I'll say this as well. I've had to learn to be more mindful with my loved ones in my life, family, girlfriend.
You got to treat them like dare. Just say no.
No, what I've had to realize is one thing I always have to be mindful of is everybody's not where I am, right? And so I also have to understand that everybody's risk appetite is not mine. If you give me $100,000, I'm putting it all on the line right now, and we'll figure this stuff out tomorrow morning, okay? That doesn't always work when you have family obligations, so on and so forth. And some people, because they don't know, they also are risk averse. So a lot of the conversation we're having today as we get into finances is also about financial literacy. So like something I do for my family and friends, I send out a financial Friday every Friday. And I did that because I got so aggravated answering financial questions, and I realized people wanted me to help them, but they didn't know basic financial lingo. And because most of us don't read anything financial on a week-to-week basis, like nothing. So the number of friends I would be consulting with, and I would say, well, what are your interest rates on your credit card, your student loans? And I would get the deer in headlights look, like an interest rate, like what is that? Is that a drink at Hardee's? Like, and so I started to realize like this is a bigger conversation for me. One, understanding people's risk appetite was important. I agree with everything that was said. Listen, you need to acquire assets because at the end of the day, if you have the assets, the debt becomes inconsequential, okay? But everybody's not gonna just jump out there like that. But it is something to be said that you do need to know how much you're paying on the debt you have. Because it might be a case that if you have a 20% credit card and whatever $1,000 you have, the best you can do is find 5%, go pay the credit card off, right? Now, there's also another part of this conversation is what is your cash flow, you know? So there's a lot of layers to this conversation about how you handle lump sums of money. I'm never a fan of just putting it all in debt because I always say for black folks, you better be prepared if you lose your job tomorrow, which can likely be the case. Do you have anything set aside to make you month to month? If you got $10,000, don't go pay all your debt at once because the bills are still gonna come the very next month, right? And so pay what you can when you need to until you can get back on your feet. So there's a lot of different layers, I would say, to that conversation.
I want to go back and forth we have real estate, we have finance over here, which they kind of go hand in hand, but I want to make some, since we have you both here, both entities here, I want to go back and forth with you guys and ask you a couple of fast round questions, which may end up not being so fast, but you invest in investment properties, flipping houses. Or partly, right?
Okay, some of that.
Some of that.
We flip houses.
Okay.
We have rental properties. We do short-term rentals. Real estate. Just
Let's start on the flipping of the house portion of it. Give us some tricks of the trade on, you know what, I got a little bit of cash. How much cash do I need to do it? I've seen on TV with little to no cash, you too can flip a house and make $1 million. How true? What are the tricks? What's the reality?
Okay, well, don't buy the dream. It's false. And even if you do have money, some of the things that I've seen for people who want to flip and have the money, they lack the ability or the knowledge. And so you get into a project, you've overpaid for a house, and now you're underwater. Or you didn't make any money on your flip if you did at all. For me, Kevin will chime in with his own opinion, but for me, certainly there's value in mentorship. And there is value in, before jumping into such a large financial project, finding people who have done it before or who can guide you, or even just tagging along. Can I just tag along? I see you flipping houses. Can I tag along and see how you do that before you jump into something like that? So there's several ways that you can do that, whether you're investing in a project via notes, like I'm lending money to somebody who's doing that. But it's sexy. And everybody wants to do it, but it's possible and viable. But The one thing I can say to people who do want to flip is find somebody who does it and use them as a resource before you jump into the game.
Okay, now on this side, we got stocks and bonds. Everybody wants to get in. You got penny stocks, you've got the blue chip stocks, you've got bonds and options. Where should I start with my money, and how can I make the best investment with little money to start off with?
I would say the first thing you need to do is before you invest, you need to learn how to save. So a lot of people, I always say investing before knowing how to save is like trying to run before you even know how to crawl. Like you can't, you have to be able to save money first because it's a discipline mechanism. First, you have to prove to yourself that I have the ability to save money for X amount of time without spending it. Once you prove to yourself that you can save money, then you need to say, okay, what are my monthly expenses? And what if I lose my job or whatever my source of income? What if I lose that? So you need to say, okay, I need to have X amount of money saved to cover for that for 6 to 12 months. So if your monthly expenses are $2,000, you need to save $12,000 to $24,000 so that if something were to happen to your current income situation, you would have money to cover you until you're able to replace that income. Once you do that, then you start investing. You can invest for as little as like $25 a month. There's all types of investments. People often ask me, well, what's the best investment? All of them. All investments work at some point in time. It's just a matter of knowing when to participate in those investments. So I would say for somebody that's younger, you need to look at what's called an IRA. Set up an IRA after you get your savings in place. IRA is a individual retirement account. You can do a Roth IRA, which is basically you are paying after-tax dollars. So once you reach age 59 and a half, you're able to take that money from it tax-free. I would start there, and then as you get a little bit older, make a little bit more money and generate more income and have more money put away, then you can start doing things that are a little bit more exotic, whether it's like managed accounts or things of that nature. But I would definitely say start with savings and then do something like an IRA.
And let me say to that point with the Roth IRA, because I used to be an adjunct at Lone Star, and so one of the things they made us do was teach financial literacy for a chapter. Why, I don't know, but that's neither here nor there. But what I would explain to students is that if you are 18, is anybody in here 18?
At heart.
Okay.
I am.
Never a bad thing. So the most important thing with money is compounding interest. Sometimes Einstein calls it like one of the greatest things ever created. If you are 18 and by the time you reach graduation age of, let's say 22, and you have saved, now the number is higher, but when I was teaching, it was $5,000. That was the max you could contribute to a Roth IRA in a given year, okay? If you've just got to 5,000, not in a given year, but between 18 and 22, that was worth about $450,000 by the time you reach retirement age. Just that 5,000, right? If it got the traditional returns that the stock market gets. So part of this is understanding that you are young, that you can take risks, and that time is really, really on your side, okay? And so that's something I would always keep in mind, even for those who are risk averse. Time is on your side, and time works when it comes to money better than almost anything else I know.
All right. Now back on the other side, flipping houses versus renting properties. So you're saying, hey, I want to get into real estate, and I feel like if I'm putting out a rental property, well, I'm only making $100 over the amount that my investment is, or maybe $200 over it, versus going to flip a house and now I'm making a $50,000 return or a $20,000 return on my investment. Which one should I be getting into, and which one should I really be focused on if I want to start in real estate investment?
To coin my wife's term, everything looks sexy on the flip side. You know, flipping houses, you see it on TV, it's whatever. But if you want to live a lifestyle where every month you have a paycheck coming in, you want rental properties. Because over time, that's the biggest wealth builder for people. It creates not only paycheck money, but it also creates equity in the property. So let's say, for instance, and this is just to give a rough example, we have a guy that we know that his daughter was born, he bought a duplex, right? Put it on a 15-year note. So that duplex might make $200 a month, right? For 15 years. So from 1 to 15, or from born to 15, that $200 a month is the monthly income, but then you also are paying down that note. So by the time your child is 15, now you have a $200,000 property paid off. Now you can use that to send her to college or pay for a house or a wedding or whatever, or you could just keep making that money from month to month to month, right? So for people who want to quit their job or live a life on a beach, you want to look at long-term income, which is rental properties. For people who are looking for chunky money, like maybe I have a bunch of cash, maybe my, a relative died and I come into a lump sum of money and I want to put that into a property real quick and the marketing conditions work for that, then you can flip that money and use the profits from that to put into rental properties. But the thing about it is, and like Ayesha said, everything can be risky. Stocks can be risky, real estate can be risky. You have to invest in yourself first through education, whether that's in the stock market or in real estate or in your job, finding out how you can increase your income by just doing a better job. The first thing that anybody should do is invest in themselves through educating themselves and making a plan. And once you make that plan, you could say, okay, I know by the time I'm 30, I'm 20 now, by the time I'm 30, I don't want to have to work again. Because maybe flipping's not the way for that. Maybe it's working your job and buying a house every year and slowly building up your income. Maybe it's, hey, I want to pay for my house in cash. So I'm going to rent this apartment and I'm going to use all the money I have to stack up, buy a house, flip it, take the profits, flip another house until I can pay for this house in cash. But once you make that plan, you can pick what your best path is. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Since we have an audience, I want to see if there are any audience questions before I go on to the next question. Ladies and gentlemen, you have the floor. If there's anybody that wants to ask, we're here for you, or these guys are here for you. And ladies are here for you. Yes, ma'am.
One of the things that I struggle with family and friends is what I call the poor man's mentality, where they get some money and they spend it while they have it, or they don't necessarily, it's a more of a, let me hold on to this because I have it now, instead of putting it towards the investments and the real estate and that so forth. So my question is, do you have any advice for trying to maybe change or help our family and friends with the information that we're learning today so that they can become part of that collective, a part of growing Black wealth?
I would say do it together. So like one thing I would tell all of you here is, I know UHD has a personal finance course. Most colleges at this point have a personal finance course that students can take. Most community colleges have a personal finance course that people can take even if they're not students. So if your dad or mom is not really good at finances, and you say, hey, let's take this class together, it's almost like a continuing ed course. But whatever you do it together. So with my Financial Friday, what has happened from the feedback I've gotten is families are talking more about money. Because African American people don't talk about money. Like we just don't. And so have you talked to your parents about what are some things that you are concerned about financially? Like you've got to open up the conversation. And a lot of times we go out, we'll talk about love and hip hop, we'll talk about insecure, we'll talk about money never comes up because everybody shies away from, well, how much are you saving this month? What can we do? Do we do a investment club? Because that used to be a very popular thing. People would invest together. So you ladies here could all chip in $50 a month and buy stocks or do something together. So that's part of, and that goes back to your conversation of doing things together. But it really is being willing to be open and have that conversation. And money's a vulnerable topic for a lot of us. A lot of us feel like, well, I don't know, but probably everybody at the table doesn't know, to be honest with you. And so having that conversation with family and friends, getting them to just open up a little bit and say, listen, this is what I want. Because it really does become a conversation about what you want your life to look like. And in order for you to even start to make those changes, you kind of have to know where you want to go and say, okay, well, how do we do this together? And how do we have the conversations? That's one of the best ways for me. I think if you've got to be able to willing to have the conversation about your own finances and have friends and family have it with you.
People will open up to you if you're open with what your situation is.
I would also say, kind of similar to what they're saying, is to walk the talk or talk the walk or whatever I'm trying to say, right?
Walk the
so
walk and
if
talk the
I
talk,
am,
girl.
if I'm saying that we should invest and we should do this, then I'm gonna do it, and then I'm gonna show you what that looks like, and then you'll be like, oh, what is she doing? And even in our real estate journey, that's what we found. So we didn't say, hey, man, everybody should invest in real estate. We went out and we invested in real estate, and we share our journey with people, and people come asking us, what can I do to do that? How can I do that? So be a good example for everybody on what you should do. And if you have the ability to talk to people or show people about it, then do that as well. But definitely do what you're saying you want other people to do.
I'd echo that. I think a lot of times people don't follow what you say, they follow what you do.
Right.
And you being successful and having something to show, at least in a small way, can guide people. Because that's what people gravitate towards. You can say, man, I'm about to go invest and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. But if you say, hey, I made, whatever it is, small investment, or my mutual fund went up 10%, I made this much money, then that can kind of drive that conversation of, oh, how were you able to do that? You're just a college student, or you don't have a lot of money. Well, it doesn't take all that. Let me show you what I did. So that success can help people, help that conversation.
So we have Clinton Myers, one of our Facebook viewers, says, in lieu of a crash of the market, what or where should we put our money? And I think he might be saying, like, what's the best investment right now?
Okay, in lieu of a crash of the market. So that requires us first to reframe our thinking. A lot of times when we think about a crash, we view it in negative terms. All a crash is prices falling. So let me ask you this. If you go to the grocery store and they said, man, they just had grocery prices crashed, would you be like, oh, I'm not going to the grocery store. The grocery prices crashed. They're cheap now. No, what would you do? You'd be like, oh, okay, let me give a better example. If Macy's, what's my wife likes Anthropology. So if Anthropology or Macy's, they said, hey, the prices or the clothes there crashed, would you be like, oh, I'm not going there? I don't want to take advantage of the cheap prices. No, you would do the opposite. You would say, okay, prices fell, so that means that things are cheaper. Let me go see if I can find a deal. So it's the same way with investing. So you need to say, okay, if the market is falling, like I'll give another example. So I have a mentor that has between apartment complexes and rental properties, he has 4,000 doors. And he makes about $800,000 a month off of that.
Does he need a lawyer?
He told me that in 2009, in 1 year, he increased his income by about $300,000 a month because everything was falling. He was able to get properties for zero down because everybody was paranoid. There was a lot of motivated sellers. They were all trying to get rid of their properties. And he basically came in and said, okay, I can get this zero down. Every time he bought one, he increased his income by $500 a month. And so he just bought all these properties, and that's what he did. But that takes reframing your thinking. Again, you need to say, okay, like, I'm praying for stuff to fall. Like, I
didn't want to say that.
Right. Like, yeah, I'll give you another example. So a few weeks ago when Nike unveiled their new ad campaign with Colin Kaepernick, their stock price fell almost 5% in one day. I told William, I was like, oh, I'm about to go buy some Nike stock. Right. And it literally bounced over 6% in the following weeks. But most people frame of mind is, oh, you better stay away from that. You're gonna lose your money. You see it just fell. So it just, again, it goes back to reframing your thinking. Hope that answers your question, Clinton.
One of my favorite quotes is from Warren Buffett. If everybody knows who that is, he's the owner of Berkshire Hathaway, basically, which you've probably used one of his products and don't even know it. If you got Geico or
Your flow
any
stuff.
number of things. But one of his favorite sayings is, be greedy when everyone else is fearful, and be fearful when everyone else is greedy. And to that point, recessions really are buying opportunities. What is the real big incident we had here last year? Does anybody remember what that is?
Hurricane Harvey.
Harvey, right? I mean, and a lot of people, so what happened, I work in property management. What I saw was, I've gotten a lot of new properties as well, because a lot of investors came through and were like, your home flooded, we'll buy it, right? And they bought it at a deep discount, and they've converted a lot of them, what were primary homes, they've now made them rental properties, because people still need places to live. There's still a lot of people in Houston.
Always.
They seem to not be going anywhere, unfortunately. And so, you know, taking advantage sometimes of misfortune is one of the ways to wealth building. But it is, as Garrick said, reframing your thought process, because you can follow the herd, and the herd might take you right out of the door of opportunity, right? And you might be standing right there with it. So
We got time for one more question from the audience, if there are any questions. And a hush came over the crowd. All right. Final words from each of you guys on what you think. If we haven't touched on it, and I know we've done a lot of touching today. If we haven't touched on it, what would you like to leave your viewers and these beautiful people as your final words?
I would say for me, the most important thing, my very core value is African American institutionalism. I mean that from the family being the foundation of African American institutionalism, to supporting elementary schools that are in African American neighborhoods, to black colleges, to black businesses, to black banks. Like, we've really got to integrate our ecosystem. So while all of you are here at UHD undergrad, I hope you will all consider an HBCU for graduate school, so on and so forth. But think about, be purposeful about your blackness institutionally as you go forward. Because as strong as we are all individually, we are all stronger when institutions and that represent our social, economic, and political interests are strong.
Garrick?
I would just say changing our thought process. So, you know, a lot of times our thinking is negative. You know, we don't have much optimism. And sometimes I can understand when you watch things unfold as far as when it comes to the African American people, a lot of times things don't go in our favor. And so what happens is that can create a cycle of, well, things aren't going to go my way, so I might as well not do anything. And then things don't go your way. So a lot of it comes down to, again, just changing your thought process, being more optimistic, you know, reading books, things that, and if you want a list of books, come see me afterwards. I'll give you a whole list of books to read that will help you, you know, just focus on your thinking and will help translate into, you know, just be more educated.
And we'll do you one better. We'll make sure you put that on the Intelligence Podcast website so you guys can go look at it right there for your viewing pleasure. Ayesha.
So for me, I would say a lot of times we are trained to be upset and angry with people who make money, who are rich. And my thought process and what I would implore all of you to do is look at them and see what they're doing that works and do that. Because the blueprint is already out there. We don't have to figure it out. There's people who've already figured that out. Follow the blueprint of the people who have done it and who are doing it well, and it works.
And last man standing, Kevin.
Just echoing my wife, you have the ability to change whatever your circumstance is based on what you focus on now. So to just go from everybody's standpoint, the common theme is intentionality and education and reframing your focus. You can ultimately create the life that you want by reframing the life that you have. And what people don't realize is you become a product of everything that you put into yourself. The same way you're a product of everything you put in your body, the same way of everything you put in your mind. So focus on what you want, not what you got, not where you're at. And I like the Arthur Ashe quote, use what you got, do what you can, start where you are.
All right now. So every week we do what we call Black Magic, where we highlight people around the world that have done excellent work as Black people in the community. This week our Black Magic will be the ladies of Alpha Kappa Alpha Incorporated for having us here today at the University of Houston downtown. We want to say thank you guys for allowing us this wonderful forum and venue, and we hope to see you next time. This is Intelligence, the podcast, bringing you knowledge with the power to change. See you next week.